Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today's Friday, so it's Self-Improvement Friday. My friend John is here talking about just a whole host of ideas. And today it's going to be about hierarchy of learning and retention. So take it away, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to everybody. Welcome back to everybody who's returning. Today, we are discussing something I think is extremely important, and this is relevant and pertinent to all other areas of our life, to all of the other meetups that we attend, to any of our exposure to any information, either voluntarily or unconsciously in the world. And that is specifically something called the learning pyramid, or I guess you could also call it the hierarchy of retention. So we're going to analyze, I guess, modalities and methods that we use to come across information, and then the associated retention rates with that. So as a preliminary note, I think it's important as we go out in the world, as I said, either voluntarily acquiring information or being involuntarily subject to information such as TV, media, news, friends, coworkers, etc. Right? We can't completely, we're kind of subject to listen to information that we didn't really design, if you kind of follow what I'm saying. So while we're doing that, I think before we get into this hierarchy of retention, it's important to, I guess I can recapitulate some lenses that I use in my personal life to, I guess, filter out information when I deem it relevant or I guess, or irrelevant to my life. So I personally use 3 lenses when I come across information. Okay, so I think these are superimposed on top of one another. So they are in a hierarchical organization. And there could be more, but as of right now, if I'm able to articulate, I think I'm using mainly 3. And these 3 lenses are as follows. So when I seek information, when I go out in the world, let's say I'm trying to learn about, I don't know, a really healthy diet. So I'm trying to improve my health. I'm trying to lose weight, gain muscle, whatever I'm having to do. The first lens is objectively true or objectively false. So I'm trying to verify if information is valid or not. So you can substantiate this with like studies or scientific facts or data. This is kind of I would encapsulate this as data. It's kind of hollow. It's just objective information. It's true or false. It's quantified. It's backed up with research. It's usually able to be expressed in numbers. So I think diet and health is a good one because yes, there's a lot of subjective opinions regarding health, but there is objective data regarding like the veracity of if this food is going to be objectively bad for me or objectively good for me. That's a pretty safe assumption we can all agree on. Conclusions. So true or false, that's the first I would say layer or lens of information, lens that I filter information through. The second would be, is this relevant or irrelevant? So we can talk all day about objective data that's true, but it might not be relevant to my particular life, right? It could be in a completely different career sector. It could be a irrelevant body of knowledge that I'm not necessarily interested in, or it has nothing to do with my life. So it's not going to really have a net positive effect on me. So there's true or false, and then there's relevant and irrelevant. And finally, something that I use on top of both of these is this information empowering or disempowering? Does it promote strength or does it kind of usher in weakness or codependency or self-pity? So an example of an idea that could be objectively true or maybe subjectively true and let's say relevant can also be disempowering. The only really example I can think of is something that would be philosophically subjective. So let's entertain some belief systems. So let's say if I said life is beautiful, life is extremely meaningful, I'm extremely fulfilled, the world is a beautiful place full of wonderful people, and person B says, maybe they entertain nihilism. They say nothing matters, people are horrible, people are, they're misanthrope, they're very pessimistic. We're both right in our own regard, and we're both relevant in our own regard too. But I would choose to err on the side of what is empowering, right? I don't think nihilism or pessimism or being a misanthrope or being negative all the time is necessarily empowering, even though it might be true to that person because it's substantiated and it's relevant to them. So with those 3 lenses in mind, that's what I use. And then when I have these, this is when we can kind of migrate into the image here. So I'm going to have Shrikant put it in chat, and we're going to look at now the learning pyramid or the hierarchy of retention. So Shrikant is screen sharing right now. So if everybody can see this, we're going to go sequentially over the highest point of the pyramid being lecture at 5% retention rate. And then finally, we're going to go sequentially through all the way down to teaching others. And we're going to explore some implications and maybe why I believe why these particular methodologies are associated with whatever percent retention rates. So at the top, we have lecture. By this metric, I'm sure these numbers are kind of arbitrary, but by this metric, it's saying this is the least, I guess, least way for us to retain information. It's 1/20th. So 5% of information is absorbed from listening to a lecture. And I think there's a few reasons for this. One, it's very easy to get disengaged. It's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to have other things to look at. You're also subject to the speaker or presenter's pace, their cadence, their organization of how they're going about in their presentation or lecture. All of you, you're kind of subject to follow along their style of delivery, which might not be congruent to yours. And like I said, there's a lot of other objective stimuli. So that's why I believe it's only 5%, because there's a lot of other variables that might go into it. So moving on to the second, I would say the second level in the hierarchy here, we would have 10%, which is reading. Now, we are still subject to the author's verbiage, terminology, argument, grammatical lens, and everything like that. But here's the thing, we are in control of the pace, which I think is very important for some people. We can choose to speed read through it. We can syntopical read. We can, I know Shrikant loves a book called How to Read a Book by Adler. It goes over a bunch of different methodologies in terms of absorbing and extracting information from a page. And there's a lot of, I guess, implementation we can imbue into reading in itself, so we can extract a little bit more, in this case double, from just a lecture, because we can pause and reflect, we can control the pace, we can compare and contrast, we can go at our own pace throughout the entire book. So I think that's why the retention for reading is a little bit higher. Now, moving on to the third layer, we have audiovisual. So I think this would be the practical example, literally what we're doing right now, like audiovisual. So we have a visual, we're looking at a diagram, and I'm explaining this diagram. This is, I think this would be a little bit higher of a retention rate, because more of your senses are engaged. Therefore, you are less prone to other distractions. So when you're listening to a lecture, or maybe you're listening to an audiobook, your visual field has the opportunity to wander and gaze. I know personally, whenever I try to listen to a long audiobook in my car, for example, yes, driving is pretty much an autopilot activity in most cases. If you know where you're going, it's pretty habitual, but your eyes have to wander. Your eyes have to look at the stoplight, look at other cars, look at other things. Maybe you're even going on a walk in the city or something. There's a lot of other things for you to get distracted by. And then I'll actually find myself, unfortunately, rewinding the last chapter because I was kind of zoning out, because I was looking at what I had to do. So I think if multiple senses are engaged in the presentation or the subject matter at hand, there's a higher retention rate than a lecture, or than just reading, than just visual, because you're absorbing some more senses. So moving on to the final section here in the passive teaching method, in the passive methodology for retention, is a demonstration. So I think this would be an extension of audiovisual, because it's imbuing a lot more I would say sensory factors into the knowledge or the data or the example that I'm trying to get across. So I think this is just a little bit of an extension, like I said, of audiovisual. And you get to learn a little bit more about practical applications of the knowledge or the data or the example that the presenter is talking about. And you might have particular questions, or you might say, okay, this all sounds good on the intellectual level, but how does this work in real life? How can I apply this to my life? And I think that's what a demonstration would do. And it's kind of like translating it from, you can say, an ethereal or ephemeral world of thought into the practical world of reality. So I think that's why we would retain about approximately a third of the information according to this diagram here. So now we move over into the participatory, I would say the active teaching method. So we have to, after we cross this chasm, after we cross this layer of information, this would mean that we are actually contributing something to the discussion. There is somewhat of a feedback loop. We are receiving, but we are also producing and creating, or we are filtering, or we are translating some of the information that we are receiving. In other words, it is bouncing off of us. It's not just existing as an island from a lecture or a book or a YouTube video or a demonstration. It's now practical, and we have to give our input and our interpretation of this. So the first section of active learning, I would say, is discussion, group discussion. And this is because we tend to retain about half of this information, because this is also an extension and superimposed on top of demonstration and audio visual. Because when we see an objective, you can say truth or fact, or maybe we're discussing a particular work of fiction or a book, like we do in many of these meetups and discussions. There's a myriad of different people who have different life experiences, different interpretations, different conditioning, different beliefs, different philosophies that can look at the same objective information and have a different interpretation of it. And on top of this, person A and person B might be from completely different backgrounds, but they're looking at the same thing. So this is going to have them, hopefully, if they're both paying attention, both leave with a more comprehensive view of either the subject or just of life in general. They might have to look at things from a different lens. And this could be a good, I want to say, catalyst to shake up our conditioning and shake up how we habitually view the world on autopilot, right? We tend to find what we're looking for, as I frequently say. And when you come across different perspectives, or when you come across, a work of fiction that's subjective and it has a lot of, maybe it's ambiguous, you have your interpretation, I have my interpretation. And if we share things, we get to have a more comprehensive experience and perspective of the objective event that we are looking at. So I think that really broadens our perspective. Not to mention, it's going to elicit questions and other lines of inquiry. Like if you say something, I'm going to say, wait, I never thought about it that way. What did you mean by that? Or can you expand a little bit more on that idea? And that's going to be like teaching me the entire time when I inquire. Also, not to mention that when I inquire, it's allowing me to steer the information or steer the discussion in a way that is most relevant. Again, back to these three lenses that I talked about in the beginning, that is truthful, relevant, and empowering for me. If I keep asking questions, questions are like I've heard an analogy as to compare it as like a leash for a dog. Like you can ask questions, you can guide something, you can guide the discussion to where you want it to go, so you can extract the most possible value that you want out of it. So I think that's why there's a lot higher retention when you have, I guess, you have say in where the discussion goes. Moving on to the next active learning method with a high retention rate as about 3/4. This is practice. So it engages more, and again, I think this is also kind of relevant to audio visual and group discussion, because it's going to engage a lot of senses. So it's not just, you're not only operating in the realm of intellectual thought as you are in maybe a group discussion, but when you practice something, when you execute on something, I talked about this in the past before, I think you're going to cross the chasm and you're going to cross the threshold between information, knowledge, and then finally wisdom. And for those who have not heard me explain this hierarchy before, information is just raw data. It's objective information. It's a bunch of random it's unorganized data, you can say. Knowledge would be data that is organized. It's truthful. It goes through these two lenses, as I talked about in the beginning. It goes through the lens of truth, and it goes through the lens of relevant, and then it's organized with a goal in mind. So it's on paper, it's something that you should do to close the gap between point A, where you are right now, and point B, where you want to be in your future. And that's knowledge. Finally, you have you cross the chasm and you cross the threshold into wisdom, which is applied knowledge. And on paper, the knowledge might be easy. It might appear easy to implement. It might say, oh, you might look at it and say, oh, that's very easy. But when you go to apply it, there could be a lot of obstacles, a lot of challenges that you might have not anticipated. And then you're going to have a lot more rich of an experience and a lot more rich perspective when you have finally translated that into wisdom. And I think wisdom is when you implement that knowledge, you take action on it, you execute with courage, and then you reflect on what you did. And then you extract some principles, you learn what didn't work, and then you can further refine your knowledge from there. And it's a positive spiral uphill. So when you do this, when you are engaging in this second to last participatory teaching method of practice, I think you are crossing these chasms, you're crossing these barriers from information and knowledge, and then finally wisdom. And I think that's why it's going to have approximately 3/4 of a retention rate. Now, finally, to the bottom of the pyramid and the highest retention rate, approximately estimated at 90%, which is teaching others. So there's a famous physicist named Richard Feynman, and on his blackboard after he passed away, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. He left behind a few quotes on his blackboard, and one of them on his blackboard was, "Know how to solve every problem that has ever been created." And then he says, "If I can't create it, I don't understand it." And there's a famous, I would say, technique called the Feynman technique, and this is also congruent to an idea from Einstein, where he says, if you can't explain something simply enough to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it, right? If you can't explain it in simple terms, you don't really have a solid understanding or solid grasp of it. And that's totally fine. It's not to bruise anybody's ego or anything. But I think a lot of people obfuscate something to deliberately, or they might deliberately obfuscate something to try to appear more intelligent or to appear more informed to satisfy their ego. But I think true genius is making things simple, making things accessible to virtually a lot wider audience. And I know this point implicitly when I try to consolidate what I learned into really, really simple things. So, or simple terminology, because I have a 6-year-old nephew, and he asked some of the most, I would say, the most profound questions I've heard from any adult ask. And he asked me things, and they truly like stumped me, like more than any other question that I get from adults. And they're so simple superficially, but it really makes me think. It really makes me, analyze and access what I believe to know to be true. And I have to second guess that. And I look at this and I say, wait, can I actually explain this in a way that he would understand? Without using these big words, without using a lot of examples, can I just give him one sentence answers to these profound questions that he has? And if I can't, unfortunately, I think that means I don't understand what I'm trying to teach to him enough. And it's I would say, a very humbling and very illuminating experience to be in dialogue with a 6-year-old. So if you have the opportunity to do so, I would strongly advise to do that, because like I said, it's going to force you to, I guess, organize your information in a different way. So another thing on this final principle of teaching, one thing that I did, I was strongly against, I would say, traditional teaching methods in school. I had a terrible time in school in my personal life, but one thing that I do remember, that I do praise my high school for, was the principle of, they would always say, put it in your own words. And this is actually a principle from Mortimer Adler's book, How to Read a Book. If you can't escape from the author's points or verbiage or vocabulary, that means you're kind of being a mouthpiece. You're being an intermediary agent for that particular work, for that particular philosophy, for that particular belief. And if you can't really interpret something, if you can't put it through the lens of your conditioning, your experiences, and then breathe life into it, I don't think it. I think there's a lot more room for understanding and comprehension if we can't escape those terms. And this is actually explained in the book, How to Read a Book by Adler. He says, when you look at a page, if you see words, if you see sentences, if you see paragraphs, you're looking at units of grammar. You're only seeing this essentially as a wall. You're seeing this page as a wall, and you're only going to look at what is. Whereas conversely, if you look at the page and you're reading through the page, you shouldn't see sentences, words, paragraphs, units of grammar. You should instead see arguments. You should see propositions. You should see ideas. You should see beliefs and philosophies. That's going to invite inquiry and not stop it. So instead of looking at it as a wall, you're going to see it as a window, and you're going to look into the similar frequency that the author was operating on, and you're going to extract some of your own insights. And again, I think the most important thing here is to put it in your own words, because you're translating it from this realm of thought, and you're also adding your unique individual experiences and conditioning to kind of substantiate the point and prove it in your own words. So I think that's very, very helpful. So a practical method that I've used, even if you don't have an audience to quote unquote teach other people, something that I've done is just frequently carried a journal whenever I read something. And Peterson actually says this. He says he advises against highlighting for whatever particular reason. I still highlight when I read books, but whenever you conclude a chapter or a certain section, or maybe when you finish an hour in a YouTube video or something, pause the video or close the book and then just write what you extracted without going back or flipping through pages, write what you extracted from your memory from the past chapter or book or section or video. And I think it's a very powerful way to make sure that you're retaining what you choose to expose yourself to. So in summarization, I think to encapsulate this entire process in what I think would be the most effective way to fully retain what we choose is first to establish some sort of lenses through which we can filter information in the world. And as a brief reminder, as I said, I like to filter information through either true or false. That's the first lens. The second lens is relevant or irrelevant. The third and final lens is this information empowering or disempowering? And then I choose to expose myself, whether it's to a lecture, whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's a group discussion, whether it's a book. And then what I do is I do two things. Firstly, I try to immediately implement what I learned. So I'm jumping from the top of the pyramid, 5 and 10% from lecture and reading, down to the bottom of the pyramid, which is practice. So let's say I'm reading a self-help book or maybe a book on exercise or diet or something, and I learn an interesting fact that could really improve my life. I literally try to add that in my calendar. So I try to set a goal to do that. And I'm like, okay, let me add this in my to-do list tomorrow. Let me try to implement this belief. Let me try to act on this idea tomorrow, or even today, if I possibly can, if it's early enough in the day, right? So I'm jumping immediately toward all the way to the bottom, which is practice. And then I also, once I implement this, once I act in this idea, I try to record this, whether in a video or whether in a discussion like we're doing right now. I'm fortunate enough to have Shrikant to present me with the opportunity to do these meetups weekly, fortunately. But if not, I also I keep a lot of journals. So I do write down what I read. I write down my interpretations of what I read. I summarize every single chapter in my own words when I read books. I take notes on YouTube videos, and as much as I possibly can, I try to make it my own. So I try to escape from the author's words and vocabulary, and I try to give my own life experiences to prove this point as if I'm going to present it to people. Now, again, you don't have to have an audience to do this, to teach other people, but if you organized it like you were going to, I think you're going to end up retaining a lot more of that information. So with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Shrikant to moderate Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. As always, amazing. Folks, so we got 4 rules for questions. Same as always. Number 1, type exclamation mark in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom in order to ask questions or comments. Number 2, keep on topic. Number 3, be brief. Number 4, speak your mind. Feel free to disagree with anybody on anything and do so courteously. So it's going to be Joe, Alex, and Kevin next. Joe, go ahead.
Hi, John. Great presentation. I really appreciated the frameworks that you laid out and how the pyramid fits within those frameworks. One of the things that I was actually thinking about is also, in addition to the framework that you laid out, was the idea of learning environments and their role as well within our learning and comprehension. If we're in an environment that is repetitive and very siloed with its information, one are unable to really become wise and actually restate problems. And I was just wondering if you'd actually talked a little bit about stating something simply. And one other area I was thinking that you could probably state something simply if you're incorporating multiple frames of reference or into your thinking, so that you can then have some form of analogical thinking that allows you to restate a problem. And I think that this is similar to what Shrikant tries to incorporate here with syntopical learning. And so I was just wondering, what do you think the idea of the environment plays in as far as our retention as well?
Absolutely, a lot. I think it's an underlying, I guess, narrative that's kind of hidden behind the surface here with all of these group discussion, practice, teaching others, etc. So there's 2 aspects to the environment. There's physical environment, of course, which I think is very important, which I haven't brought up before. Well, I might have been in a prior discussion. But for example, I know people have gone so far as to have certain cues psychologically to associate different, let's say, rooms, different desks, different workstations with a particular psychological state. People have done this with like smells, with certain lights. So a practical example is like having a desk in your room, or having a, I don't know, a certain table at your local Starbucks where you go and you always do one thing. Maybe you always work on your email there or something like that. You always go to that. So whenever you're in that state, again, you're in that physical environment, you are psychologically primed and cued to, you know, engage in whatever thing you're actually engaging in. And there's a second idea of the intellectual environment. So you brought up a really good point. So you can't really necessarily exist in an echo chamber, because it's not going to have, you know, contrasting perspectives. And I think that's the most effective way to truth, or to relevant information, or to also for us to really articulate exactly what we believe. Because if I say my belief, if I say this is what I believe about the world, this is the most effective way I think to do this, and if everybody agrees with me, we're not really making any progress, because I don't know if that's the way, to the correct way. From my conditioning, yes, that's what I believe. From my level of consciousness, from my level of understanding where I'm at right now in my early life, yes, that's what I believe. But if somebody challenges that, it's going to make me inquire deeper about why I believe what I believe. And I think that's very helpful, because that's going to mitigate the possibility of ideological possession. Meaning I might have read a author, I might be influenced politically to think a certain way, to look through a certain lens and always adopt a certain belief. And if somebody doesn't challenge me on that, I might just be a mouthpiece, or like a parrot, you can say, to represent this ideology, right? So I might not actually believe this, but as Peterson would say, I might have been trained to represent the ideology I have been possessed with. I think it's very malicious and very malevolent. And it's very important to have people, you know, in an intellectual environment that have different perspectives, so they can challenge me and they can say, why do you believe that? And it's going to make me inquire, and then hopefully arrive at something that's really authentic.
Wonderful. I just want to let everybody know that, you know, John mentioned how to read a book. Joe talked about syntopical reading. I'm going to do a whole meetup on syntopical reading and how to apply it to a whole range of books at the same time. That's going to be this Wednesday at 9 p.m. So next up is going to be Alex, Kevin, Julie, and Mark. So Alex asked, where does active recall play a part in this method?
What was the question?
Active recall. You know what, Alex, if you could explain in chat what you mean by active recall. We'll go to the next one. We'll come back to you. Okay. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, what's your question?
Yes, my question is for, in a pyramid, one is called demonstration. What's the difference is one compared to a practice doing and teaching others? I would say it's similar. Yeah. Okay.
Are you saying the difference between demonstration and practice?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good question. So if we look in the hierarchy itself, we have the first four being described by passive teaching methods. So I think when it says demonstration, it means you're watching somebody implement the idea. It means you're watching somebody. So let's say personal training, for example. If I say, hey, you should do 3 sets of a certain exercise, right? I can demonstrate the exercise. I can show you, okay, pull the weight like this, move your arm, pull your elbow back, you know, retract your shoulder blades, etc. I can tell you all of these things, and I can demonstrate the exercise. But when you get down to practice, you know, if you haven't crossed that demonstration, you haven't done anything. You're still sitting there watching me lift the weight, right? And then when you get down to practice, you are doing it yourself. And then you're going to come across all of these different nuances, all of these different contexts that you have to overcome yourself, if that makes sense. I think that's a really, really accurate distinction to make. Demonstration, you're watching somebody else, and practice, you're doing it yourself.
Yep. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is Julie. Julie, go ahead.
Hi, John. I had a question about, okay, they have vicarious learning, and then you have like your own experiential learning.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, like storytelling has, can be very powerful, because it's almost a way that you can have someone be with you and vicariously experience whatever you're demonstrating through your story.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had a question about creating interest maybe in whoever you're teaching by maybe starting with a question. Do you find that that's helpful?
Yeah, so there's a few points there. The first, we actually did a discussion on this before. It was titled, it's on Shrikant's YouTube channel, 52 Living Ideas. It was titled, The Machine Stops at Empiricism. So it kind of tackles the idea of, going out in the world and living things yourself and experiencing things firsthand, if you will. And then there's the converse approach of kind of sitting isolated from any potential danger, any potential confusion or uncertainty or worry, and then having people go out in the world for you and give you what they've learned from the world. And obviously, we don't exist on one of these two polarities. We do have a balance, because if you were completely an empiricist, you wouldn't read any books, right? That's because all of the books are secondhand knowledge. But as much as possible, I think it's effective and admirable to pursue firsthand experience of the world. And as far as eliciting interest in teaching, there's a lot of, this is actually another video Shrikant did with Deborah. It's also on YouTube, 52 Living Ideas, on how to foster a love of learning in children. There's a lot of methodologies to do this, but I do think a question will invite inquiry, and also having an open-ended question. So asking like how, or asking why, how XYZ or why XYZ, those are very ambiguous. They're going to give a lot of open-ended answers from each particular participant in the group or in the audience, so you can say. So I do think that is a good approach to lead with, yes.
Yeah, I once listened to this expert on death give a speech, and he started his lecture with the question, what if everything you thought, everything you'd ever learned about death was wrong?
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
I want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask questions. So let's not do follow-up questions. Let's ask a question, and then we'll go on to the other people, so everybody gets a chance to ask questions. So following up on Alex's question, so Zach, thanks for explaining what active recall is. So active recall is being able to recall the information at a later time or date. Are you being quizzed on it? So it's different from retention. So what do you think about active recall versus retention? Any thoughts?
Personally, I think I always conflated those terms unconsciously. You know what I mean? Like retention, I think that would be conflated, meaning that it's the same thing as recall, as active recall. I'm not saying it is, but I always looked at it that way. So I don't really have necessarily anything to add. But I've always noticed if I have put something, I tend to agree with this hierarchy that's been established. When I explain something in terms of teaching other people something in a simple way, like teaching my nephew, for example, I always find I do remember it a lot easier and I can recall it easier.
Let me ask, where does writing fit in this?
I would say that's teaching. I would say that's the bottom, because you're organizing your thoughts. And regardless of if you presented your writing or not, I think it's still the same thing.
Okay, excellent. All right, next up is going to be Mark, Dave, and Jonathan. Mark, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I was wondering if you had any familiarity with the mind mapping techniques of Tony Buzan, because he did a lot of work in terms of how memory is created and how to retain it, especially around like studying things like attending a lecture or taking notes when you're reading a book. So it's all, are you familiar with that at all, the mind mapping technique, rather than writing out words per se?
Is that like Memory Palace?
Not really. I don't think. But basically, yeah, the point I wanted to get across, one of the things he suggests in this is that you draw a map of what you already know about the topic. So you get your thoughts in order before you read the book or attend the lecture. Then you can either do one of two things. You can either draw a new mind map of the new information and then merge them afterwards. Or if you're sophisticated enough and know enough about the topic, you actually add on to your existing mind map notes as you're taking in the new information. Because this is all about making connections in your memory with things you already have. That's how you retain information. I would recommend it, but if you're not familiar with it, I can't really ask you questions about it.
Sure.
What's the author again? Or like
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna look into that. Sounds interesting.
All right. So I'm a big fan of mind maps. It's a very powerful technique, because what happens is that, I'm usually kind of exploring a very large area. So, or even if I'm reading a book, I'm trying to see what the entire argument is. So on a single piece of paper, I will have, I will basically put everything and try to kind of capture connections between things visually. And part of it is that I'm very visual. So mind maps allow me to see connections, hierarchical connections between many, many, many units at the same time. So I recommend that technique very, very highly. Next up is going to be Dave, Jonathan, and Jeff. Dave, go ahead.
Thanks, Shrikant, and good presentation, John. The thing that occurred to me about that hierarchy is that the more circuitry in your brain gets utilized, the better transfer of information. Because I know we've been talking about the brain, 50% goes to visual information. So it makes sense to me that if you're listening, but you're also watching, you're using a lot more circuitry. And the other thing that came to mind as far as transferring information or an experience is movies they would spray odors into the movie theater. And also I recall there was somebody out in the ocean, they would spray some water from the seat in front of you, spray water into your face to enhance the experience and also use all your senses. So I just thought that would be something that might tie in. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I think that's a good observation. The more sensory, or the more, you could say, the more strenuous and deliberate effort that's required, the more retention, right? And I think the pinnacle for me in my personal life is what I brought up earlier, like explaining a complex idea to a 6-year-old. Like for me, I really have to think. I really really challenges me, because yes, I can ramble on about like the books I've read about the subject or like the complex vocabulary ideas, but like he's 6. He's never heard any of that stuff. So for me to like transcend beyond that stuff to get to something simple, that's a lot of cognitive effort. And I do tend to remember those conversations with my nephew a lot.
Wonderful. See, the way I think about it, John, is that I think of it as kind of input and output. Most people think of learning as just input, but I think if you combine it with output relentlessly in a feedback loop, so even writing, for example, for me, it's a feedback loop. It is you're writing and you're reading it and you're reflecting on it and you're rewriting it. And that feedback loop, or if you're talking to someone, you're trying to explain something to someone, you're trying to put it together as best as you can, you're speaking it out, you're watching their expression, you're taking in their questions, responding to that. So it's that feedback loop of kind of connecting the motor with the sensory that is producing this. And because it's going kind of multiple levels, it's the kind of incremental improvement, relentless incremental improvement that is that is going on.
Absolutely. I mean, really quick, a practical, exactly what we're doing right now. Like I've deliberately chosen subjects to further some of these subjects that I've chosen on these discussions. I've deliberately chosen them for me to remember them more. You know what I mean? Like because it's a challenge for me to present it and like make a 30-minute discussion out of it, and then have enough confidence to answer questions about it. That's going to challenge me. You know what I mean? So it's like if something I'm foggy on, I'm like, if I want to learn more, I'm like, let me do a meetup on that, because I'm going to get as much value, hopefully, as everybody else.
Yeah, and as you know, that the only reason I do these meetups is to learn. And I do meetups. I like to do meetups only on things I'm learning, not what I know, but what I'm learning. And the way I do it is that, like, for example, I'm studying, Buckminster Fuller. So I'm doing meetups on that. And I'm talking to people who have actually spent decades studying that. And I've just been studying it but I'm trying to do my best in capturing it and speaking it out. And I'm getting incredible feedback, positive and negative, so that I get, I do this quick corrections. And that's the whole purpose. And I think many of us, in these meetups have the same attitude towards it. And it requires a certain kind of attitude towards it. You have to be committed to your own improvement. You have to be committed to learning, not kind of trying to pretend that you know stuff. But to say, look, this is the best I know. And you're open to the possibility that you're wrong. And you're always looking for the input to say, okay, can I make it better? And I think this format of actually talking to a whole bunch of people is just amazing. So that's why I do it, just like you. Next up is Jonathan, followed by Jeff. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. Hey, John. So I wanted to know when you're reading something abstract, are there specific questions you like to ask yourself when you're trying to find implications, or is that something that you find you just sort of, you naturally figure out as you go? Similar to how you had, basically, I'm wondering that because you brought up that method used to approach thinking about, a fact, look at it as objective, true or false, is it relevant or irrelevant? And so I'm wondering, do you have something similar for implications?
That's a very good question. I may implicitly, but if I do, it would be unconscious. And that's why I had the preliminary statement in the beginning. These are the three that I intellectually know of. I might have more unconsciously. And I think this is from my conditioning, because when I first the first book when I started my library was in 2014. And it was like a business/sales book. So I got into, I guess you could say I founded my library on personal development. And a lot of that book, a lot of that realm, a lot of that stuff is really like the self-help, personal development stuff. It's highly action oriented. They literally have, like, at the end of chapters, like, okay, principle 1, do this tomorrow. Principle 2, do this. And like, that's how they summarize their chapters. And I've read dozens of those books. And then eventually I began to branch off into the classics and then psychology, philosophy, etc. So I think I was literally conditioned to do that when I read things. So like I said, implicitly, I'm sure I do have some filter, but I don't think I'd be able to like espouse it. You know what I mean? Like, I identify it.
Next up is Jeff.
Hey, John. Hey, Shrikant. Thanks for this wonderful session. I think you both know that I've spent a couple of decades doing this. over 20,000 people have been through leadership programs I've done over the last 30 years. I would just want to contribute a couple ideas. One is with regard to demonstration for that step. There are two ways to do demonstration that are particularly effective. One is showing people a video story that is 3 minutes or less. And that all those factors that are stories and less than 3 minutes, and emotionally compelling in some way. But if you remember, in a session that I did a couple of years ago for the group on leadership and conflict, one of the things that I did was I had people simulate that conflict by reading a script to each other. And that demonstration, even that level of demonstration, people will remember it because it's live and it even feels real to them, even though they're not really having a conflict. Second, Shrikant, to your point about sort of input and output and curiosity, neuroscience has shown that for someone to ask a question requires a lot more thinking and a lot more evaluation on their part than to express an opinion, than to say something. Just sort of, it's in your head and you just say it, you remember a little bit of it. But there's something about needing to formulate a question that involves more work on our parts. And so asking questions of ourselves and then sharing with each other the questions that we're asking, certainly inviting participants to ask questions of a speaker, but requiring each participant to ask a question of a speaker is different, because then people know they got to come up with something. Requiring each person to ask a question in a small group, to bring a question to their group of 3 to 5 people, and they have to have a question. It's really an assignment, and allocating about 5 minutes for each person's question is really also very strong. And then lastly, to this point of diagrams, requiring people to draw something that is an illustration of whatever is being presented, or maybe anything they're thinking about it, is a wonderful thing. Even if they just draw a couple circles and put things in them, but then they have to share them in a small group. And last, coming up with proverbial sayings. People remember proverbial sayings. They remember things like, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Or we do what we need to do today so we can do what we want to do tomorrow. Or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We remember proverbial sayings at a remarkable rate, and apply them much more than if we don't know them. So there's a few ideas.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
John, let's do breakout rooms for 20 minutes. Okay. What do you want people to do in the breakout rooms?
So we have 3 questions to facilitate discussion around, which going off of Jeff's point, his third point about questions that are harder than answers. Quick side note, I actually spend most of my time when I'm designing these meetups on the breakout questions. Like it's always easy for me to organize and then talk about like the ideas, figure out what I'm talking about. When I get to, okay, typing out breakout questions for the group, I sit there for like 15 or 20 minutes. I'm like, this is hard. Anyways, so with that said, we're going to talk about 3 main questions in the breakout room themselves. The first is a autobiographical example input. What methods do you use to remember and retain the information that you come across? The second question is, first of all, do you agree with this hierarchy in terms of the highest retention is teaching others? And if so, why do you think we retain that like highest what we teach? Third question, why do some people, including ourselves sometimes, fall into the trap of endlessly searching for information and never applying that information?
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms now. Mm-hmm. And after we come back, it's going to be for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then after we come back, each of us will have an opportunity of putting the most important question that you thought of on the table. And then I'll be putting together all these questions, and I and John will be picking kind of few themes that come out of these questions to focus on. So what you're coming back with is the best question that you can ask. Okay, so I'm starting the breakout rooms now. You've got a little bit of time to put your questions together. So let's get started. If you want to jump in line in asking questions, you can just type an exclamation mark and I'll come to you first, okay? So I'm going to start with David, Jean, Akavi, and then Hyrule. David, what's your question? David Roller.
So the question that I kind of raised when we were talking about it is part of the learning process, and it wasn't introduced into the hierarchy, but maybe it is when you're practicing. How can you leverage or utilize your subconscious to assist in that learning and the retention?
Okay, how do you use your subconscious in this process? Perfect. Jean, what's your question?
Actually, this question we discussed at the group, the subgroup. My question is, what happened to the comments? So they were discussing, it seems the group format changed the comments to question, which, like I said, it's hard to ask questions. That's why a lot of people complain it's hard for them to evolve, so they have to escape. So that's my question. What happened to the comments?
Okay, because questions are hard, where you have
harder than comments.
Yes, so exactly. So harder is good, you know. It means you have to work instead of just saying something that comes to your mind. You actually have to work and saying of everything that is kind of at the edge of what I'm seeing. What, you know. So why ask questions? So I'll put that why questions. Okay, we'll handle that as a question. That's a good question, Jean. Okay. Next up is Akavi. I don't see you. Akavi, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. What's your question?
Well, if when it comes to physics and chemistry, how do you work the retention?
Okay, in the subjects of physics and chemistry. Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Now it's going to be people who have typed exclamation mark. I'm going to give them a priority, and then we'll go to everybody else. So it's going to be Hyro, Deborah with the H, and Jyoti next. Hyro, what's your question?
So the top one was something like lecture, and what came to mind was listening to audio books. Like I got a lot of Audible books.
What's your question?
And the same ones in Kindle. So the question is, a good addition to have to be able to like listen to audio book while doing tasks around the house and
Okay.
or like podcasts and things like that
Okay.
as
Okay.
an additional integrating that to the others.
Got it. Got it. So audio as multitasking. Okay. Where does that fit in? Okay. Next up is going to be Deborah, Jyoti, Deborah with the H, Jyoti, and Michael. Deborah, what's your question?
Well, Jean was being so nice because that was my question. And I think she thought I was too, like, I thought it was impolite to ask. So I do appreciate her saying that, why we do the questions.
See, that's what I like about Jean. She's not polite. She's very direct. I like that.
Yeah, no, it's great. I guess my question though would be like, I don't know how to make this more concise. Is it more effective to interact with people informally about subjects, like to kind of have a conversation about something you learned about because you're enthusiastic about it, or to formally and like deliberately try to teach others about that subject?
Okay, very good. Very good question. Informal versus formal teaching, conversation. Okay, excellent. Jyoti, what's your question?
Yeah, it's a strange question, but I'll ask it anyway. In a big lecture, when there are several topics to be covered, I tend to start processing right away, rather than taking it all in at the end and then kind of analyze it and form some questions and answer and what have you. I start doing that right away when the lecturer has already moved to the next topic. So my question is, what is a better way of handling a large amount of information,
Excellent.
auditory information?
Excellent. So I'll make it concrete. So how do you process a lecture? I'll put it like that.
Okay.
Okay. Next question is by Michael. It's going to be Michael, Kevin, and Alex. Michael, go ahead.
Yes. So this is, I guess, a challenge to the pyramid that you have to kind of teach in order for that to be the highest level of retention, for that to be gained. Might it be possible if someone puts more focus on themselves as an experiencer and approaching everything in life with beginner's mind, maximizing presence, and just basically putting as much attention on being sharp as an individual, could that person take away more from the experience and whatever is being learned from, whether it's reading or what they're hearing, and retain more nuance and be able to put it together more so, even if they had not taught that subject to someone else?
Got it. So can attention make listening far more effective in retention? Next up is Kevin, Alex, and Mark. Kevin, go ahead.
Let's pose my question first. Do we need to filter information to learn more effective from multiple resources? Now information is so exploded. When I learn something, which one's correct, which this, that's make me get a short memory. I feel like that's, if I don't mind. The second question, do you think?
No, only one
okay,
question.
Okay.
Which one is better? Is that other question better than this one, you think?
Another is better.
Okay, then I'm going to scratch this out. You can put the another one. Go ahead.
Do you think our memory retention gets shorter and shorter generation by generation as a general sense?
No, I'm sorry, I did not get it. Can you repeat?
Memory retention, like memory gets shorter memory, even shorter and shorter than generation by generation.
Oh, okay, got it. Does memory decrease? Okay.
Decrease, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's simple word.
Okay, over time.
Thank you.
Okay, but unfortunately, Kevin, I don't do this, but your first question was also good, so I'm going to include that as well. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Sorry, folks. But generally, just one question. Okay. Next up is Alex, Mark, and Judith. Alex.
Yeah, hi. I really enjoyed the breakout group. So when today's meetup started, there is some kind of discussion about the percentages on the hierarchy being arbitrary. And from the breakout group, how much deviation to the percentages do you think change do you think they change based on investment, such as emotional or otherwise? And how much deviation do you think the percentages change based on other factors like learning styles?
Got it. So, so question is there a deviation, and what is that based on? Is it based on characteristics of people or practice? Next up is Mark, Judith, and Tanya. Mark, go ahead.
I actually had two questions, so I wrote them in the chat. Very brief questions. Okay. How do you ensure you understand the subject, not just recall information?
Got it.
And if you want the second one, is how do you prioritize or select what you want to learn and or retain?
All right. Mark, you're terrible. You ask good questions, so I'll have to include both of them.
Thanks.
Okay, prioritize. Okay, prioritization and understanding. Okay, very good. Next up is Judith, Tanya, and Joe. Judith, go ahead.
Okay, so someone in my group brought up an interesting thing where we ended up talking about the Briggs-Myers types that we were, and it illuminated sort of like, or in that small 3-person snapshot of a group seemed to indicate that that like people with INTP with a thinking personality would like to gather information.
Go ahead. Put it in form of a question. What's the question?
Okay, so basically, like the other person said, personality type. How does that influence our process of absorbing and retaining information?
Wonderful. So personality types and retention.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Next up is Tanya and Joe. Tanya, go ahead.
Hi. Okay. My question is, what are some good habits to retain information in a practical sense?
Excellent. So habits for retention. Okay. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
My question is similar to Mark's. That's kind of why I wanted to follow on that one. But is it more important if teaching is the way of retention, the highest probability of retention, then is it more important to teach theories or concepts?
Okay. Theories versus concepts. Okay. All right. Let me see who is left. So I'm going to call on people. You can skip if you want. Let me see. You know what? I have quite a few questions here. Folks, I recommend that you ask questions. I think you will get a lot from it. So I'm going to call on you. You can say skip if you want. So it's going to be Linda, Sharon, and Dave.
My question was already asked by Judith.
Okay. Next up is Sharon.
Okay, so my question is, when you're studying varying teachings in succession, for instance, Dalio, Stoicism, Fuller, how do you maintain retention as you move from one teaching to the next?
Okay. Retain across books, let's say. Very good. Next up is Dave, followed by Jeff. Dave, go ahead.
Skip, please, Shrikant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jeff.
So my question for both of you is, what is your favorite one sentence saying about learning that you find yourself saying to yourself as you prepare to do these kinds of sessions?
Okay. One sentence. Next up is Julie. Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been trying to learn music theory for the last year, and I'm having trouble. And
sure.
So, are there certain teachers that are better, or is there anything you could recommend so I could learn music at 60 years old?
Okay, music theory. So that would be with a specific field. Okay. Let's see. Is there anybody else who wants to add? Let me see. I think many people have said skip. Okay. Kevin, I can't believe that you don't have a question. No, Kevin, you've already put your question down, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No,
yes.
sorry. Mike. You always have a lot to say. I'm surprised you don't have a question.
I got about 30 questions. I got
Okay,
a short comment.
What's the
A
best
short
one?
comment. A short comment.
No comments. No comments. Mike, no comments right now. Just questions.
I endorse all the questions that have been out there, and I'll save my comment if we have time later.
Sure. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and jump into all of this. So, John, so I'm going to try to organize it. So firstly, let me just read through kind of at least, large number of these questions. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let me see here. So firstly, let's talk about processing large amount of information. So questions.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
I organized some as we were going, as you were asking.
Wonderful.
So I have the biggest chunk at first. I'm saying I was able to amalgamate. I would say a question I actually had, which I didn't ask openly, but how can we be emotionally invested in learning? It kind of relates to the second question that was asked. It was actually from our breakout group. But to bring it all together, I have that with how do we leverage our subconscious in the learning process, linked with like particular subjects, so like music theory or physics and chemistry, linked with the best way to handle a large lecture, like how to tackle that. That can all kind of be one question.
Okay. I was thinking of slightly different ones. You see, use of subconscious and emotionally invested is kind of connected with emotions. There is a bunch of questions here, like retaining. How do you retain across books? How do you filter large amount of information? How do you process a lecture? Let's see what else. Is there anything else? No, I think these three questions are about kind of processing, or we'll also include understanding with that. You're trying to understand things. How do you do that? So those, and maybe even prioritization with that. So it's like, when there is a large amount of data out there, whether within a single book or a lecture, or across a field or across the internet, how do you navigate those things? Okay. So that's one thing. So the other one is about the emotion. Then there is a whole bunch of few questions about personality types. So personality types. How do you build a habit of it? Is there a deviation? I will throw in kind of informal versus formal, because that's kind of style question, style issue. So this is kind of the individual variation in how you actually handle these things.
Right. Well, why don't we just start piecing away at it, right? Because I do have a lot of questions too. So we can first address, I guess, navigating the, you can say, sea of information we're drowning in, right?
Let's do that. Yeah.
I think.
Folks, just one sec. So what we'll do is that we'll take these topics. John will comment on it, and then I'll open up for people to comment just on that topic. Okay, you can say anything you want on that topic. Okay, so the topic now is navigating the sea of information. Go ahead, John.
All right, so back without being repetitive, I think it could be useful to have these lenses of filtering, like having a filtration process. I've used true or false, and then relevant and irrelevant, and then empowering versus disempowering. Something very important to remember is actually from years ago when I did a presentation on how to read a book with Shrikant in person in a meetup in New York, and like we were realizing the importance of prioritizing books. So not every book is written equal, right? And it's like, this was a very sobering idea to learn. It's like, not every book is worth reading. Like that sounds almost redundant, like with somebody who has a library behind him. And I realized the importance of this. Some books are worthy of being like skimmed through. Some books are worthy of reading an analysis of or watching a YouTube video. Some books are worthy of like fully assimilating and digesting based on, their contribution to the particular field, maybe how long that author has taken to espouse that theory, how many years it has been standing as maybe undefeated or something like that. So I don't look at books the same. I don't look at authors the same. I don't look at lectures the same. Whereas when I used to, get my hands on a book or a new topic or anything I was interested in, I would treat it all unequivocally equal. And that was a very time-consuming mistake. So I think that can fall into the prioritization lens or bracket, if you will. And in terms of how I'm able to filter something, I have a specific ideal. So in short, have a goal. Like, what are you trying to learn for? Is it just to pass time? Is it because you're actually curious about something? Are you trying to improve your life? Are you trying to grow in a certain area? Are you trying to apply this information? Or are you just trying to pick up a new hobby on the side, right? There's going to be different variances in your investment in how serious you're going to take the information. And of course, how much you're going to retain if maybe it pertains to your career and your well-being versus if it's a side passion or project or something like that. So having it applied to areas of your life, I think can definitely help. So asking yourself a long-term question before you pick up a book. How is this going to help me? Why do I want to learn about this? I think it's the most important question to ask ourselves is why. And then with that predicate, with that goal, it's going to filter out all of the relevant and unnecessary data, I would say.
That was great. I'm also, I'm a big fan of this, how to read a book. So it has two concepts in it. One is called active reading. And this doesn't apply to reading itself. It applies to kind of living, processing information, doing things, where you ask yourself the question, what are you trying to, what's your purpose? What is the question you're trying to answer? Yes, Gene, it's the question. Like, if you have the question, it is the key that kind of opens up many things, because it's like, you try to come up with the best question that you need to answer, and you go to books in order to get the answer from that. Now, you might find in the process that you might come up with a better question in the process. So that's one thing of being active as opposed to passive. Again, the active as opposed to passive applies to engaging your motor cortex. So you're actually continuously trying to organize this in mind maps, like this, of trying to connect up everything that you are taking in to categorizing them. You're actually writing about it, and all of that actually helps. So that active component is very large in the process of organization. And the second, really the most brilliant idea that is there in the book is the syntopical reading. And I'm doing a whole meetup on that on Wednesday. So that is exactly about this topic of how do you access massive amount of information out there. So the problem, I'll just state the problem, because if you answer, if you state the problem, then you can see the scale of the solution that needs to be. I'm not going to give you the solution, but I'm going to give you the problem. The problem is there are around 20 million books out there, okay? And 1 million books are being published every year. Books, a great book is tremendously valuable. Somebody spends their entire life thinking about something and gives it to you for 20 bucks. Okay, it's just incredible deal. But there is a tremendous variation of quality, as John was saying. How do you navigate this? So that is the topic of syntopical reading. So that's what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday. So folks, anybody who has comments, questions about navigating a sea of information, you can go ahead and type exclamation mark. Dave, you're first.
Thanks, Rakan and John. Yeah, I was going to address Jody's question about having like a 1-hour lecture and wanting to deal with it just a few minutes of time to summarize, take notes, whatever. And I would suggest, we used to have small tape recorders, cassette recorders, or even miniatures. And I suppose you could do it with your phone if this is legal. And most, like a college course, I don't think they mind you recording. But the thing is, you could take some notes through lectures of important points. But if you had a recording, then you could go back and do the whole thing. And the powerful thing is, if the professor says something, you didn't quite get it, you can rewind and go through it one more time. And the same, it seems to me, the same thing we could do with these 52 living ideas, YouTube sessions. If you came to this and didn't quite get some stuff that John talked about, you could do the YouTube in a few days once your client gets it put up, and you could backspace through the thing. They're very flexible. So that's what I would suggest to try to deal with large chunks of information. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Next up is Jean, followed by Jairo.
Yeah, I want to say my experience with, I have a lot of books. I haven't read some of them. I can never have time to read. But I found food is like supplement. Like you, at a certain time of your life, you need those nutritions, or you have problem to solve. At that time, when you open the book, it's talk to you directly, or you experience directly. Then you can learn super fast, you get it. And some other book, you read it, you're not at reach a point, fully understand it, or not relevant to you. So it's kind of like, it's like eating food, you know, like you have to eat the right nutrition for your brain at a certain time. So those will really help you to grow.
Excellent point, Jean. And we will pick up on that when we talk about kind of the, emotional investment in the book and use of the subconscious. We'll connect your point with that. I think that's excellent. Jairo, you're next.
So this reminds me of not just books, but I don't know what to call what we're doing in 52 Living Ideas. Is it a lecture? Is it a question and answer? Is it, and how is it tested? How do you test out in the takeaways? And is that how good is that a way of learning?
Okay, all right. That's a great question. That's a great question. Let me comment on that, because I've designed this format. I mean, this is a format that I've developed over the last 4.5 years in our in-person meetup. So look at the structure of it. Okay, so look at this meetup itself. So John is presenting ideas. So he works very hard to produce the ideas. Okay, and as he pointed out correctly, and that's true for almost everybody. Okay, that is true for everybody. The hardest part are the questions, okay, because the questions are where you're trying to say, okay, if somebody wanted to really master what I'm saying, what questions would they need to ask themselves, okay? And that's what you have to be able to produce. So you're listening to that, then you are trying to answer those questions, and you are doing that within a group. So you are hearing the questions, answers of everybody, trying to process that. You're also speaking out your answers and getting feedback on them from other people. All right, so that's one part. Now, after that is done, we come over here. Before that, I had it easy. I had it, that you would just do your takeaways, and that works in a very large group. But I think this question is a far more deeper way of saying, okay, of all the things we discussed in this small group, what is it that I'm really curious about? What is it that I want to refocus on? And let me put it forth. And then you will find that people, not just the 4 people that were there in that group, but now you have the entire, 29 people or 40 people, whatever people are here, to give you feedback on that. And you're trying to correlate all the questions. That's what we're trying to do. You're trying to see the patterns in questions that other people have come up with. These are the best questions of everybody. And we're trying to see patterns of questions. So what it does is that it's a way of really chewing through a topic, looking at it from multiple angles. We're using the fact that it's multiple independent minds who are willing to express their thoughts, ask their questions, give their criticism, and we are able to, kind of each of us processes that. So that's what it is. It's kind of like this process on steroids in a short period of time, trying to explore a topic. I call it joint exploration of the world, ourselves, and ideas. So that's what we're doing. We're doing joint exploration. So we are teaching each other, we are learning from each other, all at the same time. John, what do you think? What are we doing?
I've always defined these to myself as discussions. Even if I'm giving the presentation for 20, 30 minutes, I always look at it as a discussion, because obviously you have these subtle cues of the chats, you have these Q&As after, we have these breakout groups after, but I've always loved when you first made the second meetup group, like years ago, it was titled like intellectual, like you said, joint discovery, joint exploration of the world, intellectual marketplace. That's the term I was looking for. I've always loved that idea, I guess, theory, that like way to capture exactly what we're doing here. And I agree. I look at that as a joint exploration, because it's like it's us versus the problem. It's not my belief versus your belief. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we're both here. Here's the problem. Here's the idea. Here's the presentation topic. Here's the book. Here's the movie. Here's the theory. Now let's both look at it. You know, it's not like we're both on opposite sides looking at each other's beliefs and arguing the whole time. It's we're mutually exploring something.
Excellent, excellent. So let's go to the next constellation of questions. This have to do with emotional investment. So it's emotional investment, and then kind of use of subconscious. And the point that Jean made about motivated studying. Go ahead, John. So what are your thoughts about this?
Okay, so this actually came up in our breakout group as well. I think the underlying, something that underlies this entire hierarchy of retention and learning pyramid is the act of willing, or the act of desire, the act of like having an interest in the subject, right? So it's like I brought up in the breakout group, if I'm practicing something or teaching a subject that I'm not interested in, it has no relevance to my life, maybe it's inconsequential, has no net positive effect on anybody involved, I'm probably not going to remember it. I'm probably going to get it over with and just have be relieved it's over. So I think interest and passion and emotional investment highly ties into this. And that was my answer to why do we think teaching others yields highest retention? And this is something that Alex actually brought up in the breakout group. There's the emotional investment of not only my perspective on the issue, but also my hope that this information is constructive to you, right? So that'd be like the intention behind teaching it. It's hopefully it's going to improve your life in some format. And also the preparation aspect. So you're emotionally invested in it because you've simply spent more time preparing in terms of teaching other people. So I think that's going to probably, you know, another question here. I think that was actually from Alex, is like, can the percentages deviate based on our investment? I do strongly believe they would, but I do still put teaching others at the hierarchy of the pyramid. And I know another question, I don't know if it's appropriate to get into here, was can kind of like presence and attention to the moment and empiricism, you could say firsthand experience, kind of trump that? I think it was from Mike. I would put it higher on the hierarchy than like these passive ways of a lecture and reading, etc. But I do still think consolidating something for other people to explain, for other people to understand, would be the height of the retention, because I think it's encapsulated perfectly in the emotional investment. Like I said, you're teaching something, and it's one thing to have these thoughts. Something else that came up in the breakout group is one thing. When we're reading something, we have it in our head, we think we have it organized. But once you start to explain something, you quickly come across these, you know, as mentioned in the breakout room, gaps of your knowledge. You come across, okay, I'm actually ignorant at that point. I'm actually making up stuff right now to make myself look intelligent right now. Oh, I'm actually just like skirting, you know, hiding around that aspect because I don't even want to tackle that because it's too intimidating. So in short, to loop back to the question, or to the principle, to study something that is relevant to your life, it's going to have a higher emotional investment, and that is going to increase retention across all modalities, across reading, lecture, across literally everything. And I think the best way to do that personally is to ask yourself, going back to another question we were talking about, why am I studying this? Why is this relevant to my life? Why do I want to watch this YouTube video? Why do I want to read this book? Why do I want to build this library? Why do I want to read this book instead of that book? How is it going to affect my life in 10 years? How is it going to affect my relationships? How is it going to affect my intelligence? How is it going to affect how I conduct myself in the world socially? So looking at the consequences in terms of all areas of your life, I think it's a very effective way to prioritize the information emotionally and then have a better investment into it. And obviously it yields higher retention.
Excellent, John. So I'm going to open up for any comments or questions on motivation and learning. So I'm a big fan of, you know, motivated learning, because there is just so much in the world, and you really need yourself to be completely motivated in order to kind of explore things in depth, in breadth. It's a lot of work. It is much more effective to kind of work with your motivation, get feedback from your intuition, make plans based on, you know, what really matters to you. And you're going to learn a lot more this way. For example, like a, you know, Montessori system is based on that. So you provide the child with everything that they need to learn around them, and then the child chooses what they are interested in. And at different points of time, they will choose different things. And they will choose the level of complexity based on what they can handle, what they find challenging. So it's the same thing for us. So I think motivation is huge. If anybody wants to comment on motivation, you can do that. Otherwise, we'll go to the next topic, which is going to be personality, and how does personality variations apply to this. All right, let's go for personality. So John, so this is a whole series of questions about how does personality type affect this? How is it, what are the kind of deviations from those percentages based on both your kind of nature as well as the practice that you've done? Yes, thoughts?
Yeah, so there's two approaches to this answer.
Let me, John, let me interrupt, because there are two people who typed exclamation mark while I was not noticing.
Okay.
So this is, so folks, we're talking only about motivation and learning right now. So Jyoti followed by Kevin. Jyoti, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a comment to make about motivation. I agree that motivation is a very important factor in learning. But sometimes in life, you lose motivation and you have the desire to learn, but you don't have the motivation to learn. And in my personal experience, I have noticed that I make myself read something, and then it creates a motivation in me. It goes the other way around. It goes backwards, and then I get like a start for learning further. And I think sometimes you have to take that into consideration, because if you go strictly by your motivation, you can lose out a lot on learning.
Yes, that's brilliant point, Jyoti. Absolutely. I mean, that's the heart of kind of cognitive behavioral therapy. You figure out what you need to do, and the moment you start acting on it, that actually produces the motivation over time. So excellent point. Next up is Kevin, followed by Joe.
Just follow John the last suggestion about for adult, you can choose information, analyze the consequence. What any suggestion for the kids? Go to school day by day. What's the motivation for the kids? Thank you. That's a question for John.
Okay. So I brought this up earlier. Shrikant actually did an entire meetup on 52 Living Ideas YouTube channel about how to foster a love of learning specifically for children. So on this particular subject, they did like an hour-long discussion. So I think that's a pertinent place to go for that. But I mean, something practical I always try to facilitate in my nephew. First of all, I literally financially incentivize learning for him. I give my nephew, he's 6 years old, I give him $5 every time he does a book report on one of Aesop's fables. And everybody who's been to these meetups know I love Aesop's fables. I've done like 4 of them here on the Self-Improvement Friday channel. So I always try to foster a love of learning, not only financially incentivized, but I also say anything you want to do in your life, the key to get there is to learn enough. It's like if you continually learn, if you continually surpass yourself, if you continually if you never stop asking questions, you will eventually arrive at wherever you want to go in your life. So I think that's an overall way to kind of facilitate your level of learning. But there's always there's a lot of practical and like specific tips in that particular video. So I would recommend going to 52 Living Ideas YouTube channel and just searching that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that video is great. That video is great. But there is another video also I would recommend that's on Montessori. Which is also on our 52 Living Ideas. So
what's the keyword for that video? Like
just search
Johnny.
for Montessori. It's in the playlist for Switch. And then you can find it on Montessori, that one. And then the other one is by Deborah. So you can Debra. You can search for that. And both those are incredible. I like the Montessori system as a system for teaching kids. I have not seen anything that has even come closer. Like most of the way in which education is done, I think is anti-learning. Just the idea of kids sitting in a classroom, learning from a teacher that is lecturing to them some topic that itself is a very unnatural, we are used to it, but it's a very unnatural thing. That's not how we learn. And Montessori actually has structured it so that everything is available to the child, and they actually are learning on their own, learning a little bit from each other, and teacher is standing there who can help the child with anything and is ready to help whenever the child gets stuck. So it's more of a guide and kind of showing what is possible rather than actually leading. So at the end of it, what kids walk away with is their ability to learn independently. Because really in education, if you learn how to learn, and if you're motivated to learn, if you can give those two things to a kid, then they're all set. That's really the core of it. And that's what Montessori focuses on. Next up is Joe.
I'll just make a brief comment because I think it applies also to the next question as well, is that the idea of motivation is, I think the key ingredient is obviously curiosity within that process. And not only is it curiosity, but there's a second component to that, and that is also your comfort level with struggle and will as well. Because I think that, the more curious you are, the more you're going to be branching into new areas, and you have to be comfortable with redefining what failure really means within that context if you're really going to learn. And I think that that's where, we start to get used to, that gets us out of our normal siloed types of forms of learning as well. So I think that that's just, the idea of motivation, I think it's also based on the idea of curiosity.
Excellent. And I just want to add one thing, with the motivation. One aspect of it is just kind of pushing yourself beyond the limits. That is crucial. Like, it's not motivation is not about something that makes you feel comfortable. There is a level of challenge. So there is kind of curiosity. I'm saying, okay, am I trying to go beyond? Like, for example, tomorrow I'm going to be discussing politics. I really don't know how to do it, but I think it's worth it. And I'm going to figure out some new things that I've not thought of. Knowing fully well that I'm not going to be as good at it as maybe another topic that I'm familiar with, I'm still going to go ahead and do it because I will learn something. Next up is Alex. Alex?
Yeah. And I'm not quite sure if I agree with that, but when we were talking about the kids too, that made me think of, we tend to learn better when we're having fun, right? And like, kids learn when they're playing best. And I'm not sure if I have a question quite yet, or if it's a comment, but just kind of like, motivation is definitely important, but if you can have a presentation or some kind of be in a learning environment where you're enjoying it and there's humor in it and engagement in it, you're going to learn more than in the presentation that's dry, and so that also kind of takes me to the kids. And yeah, when they're in a classroom and they're just being lectured at, they're not going to remember it. So yeah, just having fun with what you're learning is, and how that relates to motivation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The one point I would make is that, like, when you look back at, I've looked at lectures from Richard Feynman, for example. The thing is that his genuine curiosity of the lecture person who is present comes through, and that is very infectious. So what happens is that the problem is that many teachers really, they don't love the topic that they're teaching, and they don't love teaching either. So they're just kind of going through the motions, and that's not good. There is really nothing that can be done if you come at it from that perspective, because you do not actually respect the curiosity. You do not care about curiosity. You do not care about the topic. How are you going to get somebody to do something? So absolutely. But I think by example is the most powerful way of because people pick up not only on just the kind of pleasure, but kind of the excitement of learning itself, something like that. Okay, let's go to the next topic. Alex, but great point about personality. So, John, how does variations in personality shape how you take in ideas? How do you learn ideas?
Very good question. So there's two approaches to that answer. The first is I want to actually coalesce Alex and Joe's points about, so Joe was bringing up like your temperament, your proclivity, your strengths, your weaknesses, how you act when you're struggling, for example. And Alex is talking about like the importance of enjoying your time when you're having fun. So to imbue those two is like, who are you when you are in the face of adversity? Do you know yourself? Do you know how much you can focus? Do you know how strong your willpower is? Do you know what you do when you're bored? Do you know where your mind tends to wander after an hour of focus? Can you even focus for a full hour? I mean, and that's not a condescending statement. Like you should know whether like you work better in spurts or where you work better like with your head down with zero distractions. So a lot of experimentation is obviously necessary. I think that's at the more I guess like practical level, but like in terms of like specific psychometrics, somebody brought up Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, also known as MBTI, 16 personalities. Some people know a little bit about it. Some people like this is a whole rabbit hole in itself. But I learned about MBTI from Shrikant actually at a meetup a few years ago. I decided to take the test. I've been obsessed with it ever since. I take the test every year. I've taken cognitive function tests. I've gone down a whole rabbit hole multiple times into it. And it has greatly influenced the particular way that I learn and the particular way that I that I structure my presentations, the way that I tend to interpret and retain what I learn. So for a practical example, I've taken the test like I said, multiple times, 6-7 times. Every single time I get the type INTJ. So that means my cognitive functions, my dominant functions are NI, which means introverted intuition. And the second is TE, which means extroverted thinking. If people are new to this, it's totally fine. I'll explain it. So basically NI, this is actually a metaphor that I remembered from Shrikant when he told me this literally years ago, because again, it was a very, very transformational catalyst point in my intellectual journey. NI is like visualized like a black hole, like a whirlpool of information. I see this information, I see this idea, this belief, this philosophy, and it's all swirling toward this like black hole, toward this middle, toward this singularity. That's introverted intuition. And that's why I think I have a proclivity to connect. Like if you give me enough time, you give me 2 random subjects, I'll eventually connect them. Like, because they swirl, I'll eventually connect them to a principle. And then TE, extroverted thinking, like its main question is like, so what? Why is this important? What am I going to do with this? How do I use this to better my life or improve the world? So like, that's the way I structure literally all of my information. Because I say, this is further a lens that probably in this hierarchy as well for me. I attach everything down to the singularity. I say, what's the real message here? What are they really, what's the underlying interpretation? What's the underlying principle? That's like what's written in between the lines, so to speak. And then I take it and I say, so what? Why is this important? Why is it relevant? What can I gain from this? How can I use this? How can I extract the value here? And that, like I said, studying that has greatly influenced my learning. And it's greatly influenced my retention as well. And again, this is very idiosyncratic. It's very personal. This might not be an effective approach for somebody else. You know what I mean? So in terms of temperament, in terms of personality type, I do strongly urge somebody to look at, it could be the psychometrics, like the specific stuff I'm mentioning, but also just experiment with different learning styles. Maybe you retain more from a lecture. Maybe you're a better teacher. Maybe you're a better reader. Maybe you work better in spurts of 20 minutes. I think it's Pomodoro technique or something like that. It's like 15 minutes on, 5-minute break, 15-minute work, 5-minute break, etc. Third break, I think is 20 minutes. That's actually a studied technique for retention. Some people, like I said, work better an hour on, 30 minutes off, for example. So I think in terms of practically speaking, experiment, but also look into these little psychometrics, look into these MBTI things, look into these cognitive functions. I think they're very, very effective in terms of like a methodological approach to your learning.
Okay, excellent. So I would add something to that. I think this is very deep of trying to actually understand yourself, and kind of. So firstly, I would say is that you can't really take these methods as given. You kind of have to work with yourself. Tanya, you have been putting exclamation marks a lot. So let me go ahead and give you a chance to speak. Go ahead, Tanya.
Sorry. I really wanted to step in to kind of flow with what John was saying about MBTI. So I've always had this kind of skepticism with MBTI and its archetypes. I feel like it's one-dimensional in a way. You know, we all carry all these cognitions like introvert thinking, extrovert thinking, introvert.
Let me do one thing. Let me
So-
set up, let me first kind of explain to people, because it's very difficult for people to get criticism of something that they have not even grasped what it is. Okay. So I'm going to say, I'm going to give, I'll take a little bit of time to talk about what it is. And then I'll be happy to hear that, because that will give you enough things on which you can kind of say, okay, this is what is lacking. Ultimately, the core person who has developed these ideas is Carl Jung. And he has this concept of psychological functions. Okay, so essentially, what you're trying to do, and kind of coming back to what I was saying, you kind of, in order to figure out what learning style works for you, you actually have to learn about yourself. Okay, it's not like one shoe fits all. You have to learn, you have to kind of figure out how you operate, and you have to structure your learning accordingly. So people vary on various axes. They vary on to what extent they think through things objectively, to what extent they are focused on the outside objective world and trying to see patterns, trying to do something with the outside world, and to what extent they are emotional, to what extent they are in touch with their own emotions, other people's emotions. There is a big difference in those. Now, the thing is that it's not either or. Okay, none of these is either or. You have some extent of it, and you will, if you kind of, once you understand these concepts and you start talking to people, you realize, oh, this person actually has a much more fine-grained and solid grasp on the outside world and how things are planned out in the outside world than I do. I am kind of vague in that. Or you can say that this person feels things far more intensely than I, or notices things kind of much more kind of delicate feelings, surprising things, notices it very quickly, whereas I don't. So it kind of allows you to kind of calibrate yourself. And that doesn't mean that whatever your strengths are fixed. You can always work on your strengths to make them even stronger. And you can also work on your places where you're relatively weak to make them stronger. But it is always good to know where you are. Similar, so that's one of the axes, kind of feeling and thinking. The other axis is that of how do you take in information? Okay, do you take in information in concretes? Like some people have almost photographic memory. Okay, they will say, it's like my sister or my mother. It's like they will say, remember when you were 13 and when you went there and that's what we did? I said, no, I don't. Like they have a very detailed memory. Or even when they're trying to do something in the physical world, the attention to detail of everything that they're doing is amazing. So that's kind of the sensory focus. Whereas the other kind of focus is to focus on patterns, which Jung calls intuition, where that's what John was talking about, kind of introverted intuition, where you're trying to kind of see what is the pattern here, what is the vision here, what is the basic thing that all of this boils down to. If I were to bring it all together, what does it look like? And so there is a difference, and people vary to the extent to which you do this. And what Jung does is that it allows you to be aware of various these things, and to use them to kind of find out where you are. And Jung certainly thought that you can make significant changes. You change over your lifetime, you change on this depending on what you do. But at the given time, you have certain strengths and certain weaknesses, and it is good to be aware of those. So that's what this whole enterprise is about. MBTI in some ways a much more kind of very simplified version, and in some ways I think very restrictive version. I think human beings are far more complex. I think I'm more kind of Jungian in this way than MBTI. So that's my kind of take on MBTI. Tanya, go ahead now.
Okay, thank you. So I've been trying to study cognitive functions for a long time, and it's not necessarily individual cognitive functions. It's more like how they relate to one another, like in axes.
Are you reading? Whom are you reading? What do you like?
Oh, just Jungian at the moment.
Jung?
And yeah, CSJ. He's one of the big personalities on YouTube that speak a lot about.
What I would recommend is that the best person I've seen is a guy called Michael Pierce. He's the most kind of Jungian in that. I don't want to go, Tanya, I don't want to go.
So I just wanted to add two really quick, like
Sure.
interesting facts about this.
Sure.
So what I found really interesting is like there's shadow aspects within our personalities that help us grow. And we sometimes kind of miss that aspect. So like not necessarily being so ego driven, which is not a bad thing. It's what we're really comfortable with. So for example, if you're to say you're an INTJ or you're a ENFJ,
okay,
then you feel
Tanya, we're going to lose a lot of people. Let's do one thing.
Yeah.
What I recommend to everybody,
That's
if you're
pretty
really,
much
if you're really,
thanks,
Tanya.
Yeah.
What I want to do is that I want to give people resources where they can learn if they want to know more. We have a video which is one of our most popular videos. It's called the 8-function model, and that is by Richard Owen, and the guy who actually invented the model was here. His name is John Beebe. What he does is that he talks exactly about these shadow functions and how they actually operate. He connects Jung's ideas about archetypes with ideas about psychological functions. I mean, it's just brilliant work. And that's where you would actually understand a lot of these basic things. And Richard has done a fantastic presentation of explaining what these individual functions are and how they work as a system and what role each of the function plays within it. So that's what I would recommend to start with, and then we can continue. Maybe I will do a full meetup on this topic. All right, thanks. Next one is, let's see. Okay. All right, so everybody has put their types. So there is a lot of N types. Almost everybody here has an N type. Okay, that's very interesting. That's actually true for most meetups. When I used to do MBTI meetups, you know, I did experiments, and I used to kind of divide people into different groups. And once I made a mistake, twice I made mistakes. I would typically get about 80 people every Saturday to talk about, you know, with various types and everything. So I said, okay, one day. So there are two mistakes. The first mistake I made was when I said all the introverts on one side and all the extroverts on the other side. Oh, it was a complete disaster because the introverts just sat there, didn't talk to anybody, and they were bored out of their mind. And the extroverts were complaining loudly that nobody wanted to listen to them. So that was one disaster. The second disaster, I said, okay, all the N type on one side and S type on the other side. And of the 80 people, I think there were 2 people who were S type who come to this. So because for N type, you know, they're trying to see patterns amongst personalities. So they are, you know, though in general population, S types are actually more numerous. So they're more like 60%, 70%. But at these meetups, we get more N types. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let me see if there is any other. Okay. So I think we've covered a lot, John. How about you talk about what's coming up next?
Okay, so next week, I wanted to talk about the importance of setting boundaries in terms of like negative behavior. So you can kind of say change, like turning around bad habits. When we know we're going downhill somewhere, how do we just kind of stop and turn around? And I'm using the movie Limitless to explore that example, to use the example. I'm taking an example from that movie. You don't have to watch it. It's optional. I'll explain it regardless. But we're using that as an example to explore the nature of turning around bad habits and setting up those boundaries.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's always a pleasure to have such conversations. And John, great presentation as always. And see you next Friday.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.